something patient. The camera falls closer, through holes of forged obsidian, past bioluminescent veins pulsing in the dark like arteries, into a war chamber.
We're taking heavy
lit
losses at the
red
front
by
line.
emergency
I need a
alarms.
full tactical
A
retreat to
woman
the...
in living
Reroute
armor
power to the
stands at
shields and jump
navigation
drives.
console.
We are leaving
7
orbit.
feet tall, platinum hair, skin like porcelain lit from behind, 20 years on the throne. Then, a blade. It slides through a seam that should have been sealed. Surgical, precise, from someone who knew her bones. She does not scream. 3,000 light years away. A tired doctor sets down a cup of cold coffee. He hears the airlock hiss. He looks up. 8 rifles are aimed at his chest. And somewhere, deep inside a woman who has not been touched in 20 years, something ancient begins to wake. Part 1. A cathedral of black stone drifts through the void. 60 decks, 5,000 cabins, a fusion reactor humming like the heartbeat of something ancient, something patient. Inside a war chamber, red emergency lights pulse in slow waves. A woman in living armor stands at the navigation console, 7 feet tall, 20 years on the throne. 67 star systems tremble at the sound of her name. Then, a blade. It enters through a seam in her armor that should have been sealed. Surgical, precise, from someone who knew her bones. She does not scream. She turns. The shadow is already gone, slipping back through a hatch that someone unsealed. Someone she trusted, 3,000 light years away. A small outpost on a forgotten asteroid. A tired doctor finishes a cup of cold coffee. He does not know it yet, but the airlock is about to open, and the universe is about to change. I thought I was just fixing a dislocated shoulder. Turns out I was binding my life to the most dangerous woman in the universe. My name is Dr. Renek Vale, 35 years old, exiled medic. Permanent night shifts at the worst outpost in the galaxy. And this story does not start with me. It starts with her. The blade came from behind. Empress Sharon was 26 years old. She had sat on the obsidian throne for 20 years. She had crushed rebellions before her body finished growing. She had silenced star systems before she learned to grieve. And tonight, on the war deck of her flagship, the Onyx Vanguard, someone had slipped a knife between the plates of her armor. It was not meant to kill her. It was meant to break her. The blade slid into the seam at her shoulder. Surgical, precise. The kind of strike you only learn from blueprints, from training manuals, from years of studying a body and knowing exactly where it bends. Sharon did not scream, because Valari Empresses do not scream, because she had been taught at 6 years old that pain was a private thing, that weakness was an invitation, that if you bled alone. She turned, caught nothing. The shadow was already gone, slipping back through a service hatch that should have been sealed 3 hours ago, which meant someone with access had unsealed it, which meant someone she trusted wanted her alive, but broken. She pressed her clawed hand against the navigation console. The metal groaned under her grip. Around her, the red alarm lights began their slow, rhythmic pulse, painting her black armor in the color of arteries. Her shoulder hung wrong, dislocated, not severed, cracked along the seam, but still functional. Whoever did this knew exactly how much damage to leave her with. Wanted her hurting, wanted her vulnerable, wanted her to choose where to bleed. The door burst open. Commander Kalen arrived with 6 guards. His pulse rifle was already up. His face was carved from the same stone the Empress was built from. 8 feet of armored fury, eyes the color of cold iron. Empress! His voice cut through the alarms. Single assailant, trained, familiar. Point of entry, port hatch. That hatch was sealed. He did not pause. Kalen understood the pause. Imperial Medical Bay is 12 seconds away. No. The word landed like a verdict. Because the Imperial Medical Bay reported to the Council, and the Council reported to Thessar, and Thessar was one of 4 people on this ship with Level 1 clearance. There were only 4. Herself, Kaelin, General Draven, and Elder Thessar, the man who had raised her since she was 6 years old, the man who had dried her tears at her mother's funeral and then taught her never to cry again. One of them had unsealed that hatch. One of them had wanted her like this. "Find me somewhere else," she said. "Somewhere off-grid. Somewhere unimportant. Somewhere no one would look." Kaelin hesitated. In 20 years, she had never refused Imperial protocol. "Empress, the medical. The medical bay is compromised. Protocol is compromised. The ship is compromised." Her eyes burned violet, so dark they looked like wet ink. "Find me a hole in the wall. Now." He bowed. He found her Halcyon 9, 3,000 light-years away, in a forgotten corner of the Kepler fringe. A rust bucket of a refueling station bolted to an asteroid, the color of old bone. That was where I lived. That was where they sent me when they could not decide whether to fire me, or kill me, or just forget I ever existed. I had taken option 3 for myself. The lights buzzed, the coffee was burnt, the recycled air tasted like static. My boots were untied because I had been on shift for 14 hours, and I had stopped caring about bootlaces somewhere around hour 9. I had 3 patients that month: a docker with a sprained ankle, a pilot with mild gravity sickness, a maintenance tech who got his hand caught in a ventilation grate and was too embarrassed to ask for help until his fingers turned purple. This was my life. This was the consequence of saving a child the Terran military told me to let die. 12 years ago, I was 23, fresh out of medical residency, stationed on a border outpost during a brief, ugly conflict between the Terran Federation and the Valari frontier. A little girl had been pulled from the wreckage of a civilian transport, 4 years old, orphaned, bleeding from a punctured secondary lung. The admiral on duty looked at her chart and said, "Not covered. Let her go." I did not let her go. I operated for 9 hours, used supplies I was not authorized to use, adapted Terran techniques to Valari anatomy with nothing but a hand-drawn diagram and a stubborn refusal to lose another patient. She lived. I lost my career. Her name was Lyra. She would be 16 now. I still wrote to her every month, from an outpost on the edge of nowhere, because some choices you make once, and then you keep making them for the rest of your life. On the corner of my desk sat an old brown leather medical bag, cracked, scuffed, older than I was. It had belonged to my father, Dr. Weston Vale, combat surgeon, 20 years military. He had carried it through more wars than most men see in a lifetime. He was not with me anymore. Neither was my sister. But that was a story for another time. A story I did not tell. Not to anyone. I made another cup of coffee. That was the shape of my life. The airlock hissed. I was halfway through a cup of coffee that had crossed the line from drinkable to philosophical. I looked up, and the doorway filled with black glass. 8 Valari royal guards in full battle armor poured into my infirmary like spilled oil. They moved in tactical formation. They smelled like ozone and metal and that copper tang stress hormone Valari released when their adrenaline peaked. Their rifles came up, 8 barrels aimed at my chest. My very small, very human, very unarmored chest. I set down my coffee. I sighed, and then the formation parted. She walked through, like a queen walking through her own kingdom. 7 feet tall, armor the color of a starless night, hair the color of platinum smoke falling in a single braid down her back, skin so pale it looked like porcelain lit from behind, eyes that shifted color like a dying star, silver violet, then deeper violet, then something that was not a color so much as a warning. I recognized her instantly. Anyone with a HoloNet had seen her face. Empress Sharon, conqueror of the Crimson Nebula, The woman who had raised two rebellions before she turned 20. The reason 67 star systems went to bed with the lights on. She was 26 years old. She was the most feared sovereign in the known universe. And right now, she was favoring her left side so heavily her entire torso had rotated to compensate. Her armor was cracked at the shoulder. Pale Valari blood was drying in the seam. She was hurt. And under the fluorescent buzz of my outpost ceiling, she just looked tired. I looked at the 8 rifles pointed at my heart. I looked at the Empress on my bio bed. I looked at the cold coffee I would never finish. Usually, I said, I get a please or a thank you, not a firing squad. The guard stiffened. Guns down. I can't fix her if I'm dead. Silence. The Empress made a clicking sound in her throat, a frequency I felt in my molars rather than heard. The rifles lowered, slowly, reluctantly, like a tide that had been told to stop. I walked toward her, hands visible, movement slow, the way they teach you in residency when an alien dignitary lands on your table. Radiate calm, project safety, make them believe you are not going to hurt them, even though they could break you in half, even though they probably had broken many things in half, even though every cell in your body was screaming at you to run. But underneath the fear, underneath everything, I was a doctor, and she was hurting. Permission to touch your highness. She turned those eyes on me. I had read about Valari biology in medical school. Their physiology was built around the idea that vulnerability was death, that to be injured in front of another being was to invite the killing blow. So when she let her gaze meet mine, when she nodded, once, curtly, it was not a small thing. It was the surrender of something ancient. Do what you must, she rasped. Her voice was a blade wrapped in velvet. I stepped into her space, my hands soft and unarmored and ridiculous against the cool, hard plate of her shoulder. I felt the architecture of the dislocation through the chitin. I felt the tremor that ran through her entire body when I made contact. Not fear, something deeper, a biological reset, like her cells had been waiting 20 years for a hand that was not holding a weapon. Deep breath, in and out. She inhaled, a rattling sound, from somewhere ancient inside her chest. On 3, 1, 2. I never waited for 3. You give a patient time to brace, and the muscles lock, and the pop becomes a tear. I pushed, I twisted. The crack was sickening, wet, final. And then she fell forward, just a little, just enough that her forehead came to rest against my chest. 2 seconds, 3 seconds. The most powerful being in the galaxy, leaning against an exiled medic in a stained coat. It was an accident of gravity. It was the body surrendering before the mind could stop it. And I did what I have always done. My hand came up on its own, because that is what hands do. When someone is hurting, the way any human hand does, without thinking, without asking. It landed on the back of her neck. My thumb brushed the softer scales there, the hidden ones, the fragile ones, beneath the armored plate, the place she had probably never let anyone touch, and her entire body went still. You're okay, I said softly. You're okay. I've got you. From Sharon's side of that moment, the universe ended. She had not been held since she was 6 years old. 20 years, 2 decades, 7,300 days. She had counted them. She had stopped counting. She had started counting again on lonely nights. Her mother had been the last. Empress Elira, gold eyes warm as morning, the lullaby in the nursery, the arm that had wrapped around a 6-year-old shoulder the night before the coup. The next morning, Elira was dead. The next morning, Sharon was on a throne with blood drying on the steps. The next morning, Elder Thasar had knelt before her and told her she must become something that cannot grieve. And she had. She had become the thing that burned worlds, the thing that held 67 systems in an iron grip because the alternative was chaos, The thing that had not been touched without tactical purpose in 20 years. Every hand that had reached for her wanted something. A treaty, a favor, a blade between her ribs. And then this man, this unremarkable, exhausted, mildly irritating, coffee-smelling human, put his hand on the back of her neck and told her she was okay. The warmth of it hit her like a shockwave. Not the temperature, the intent. There was no agenda in those fingers, no calculation, no fear. He was touching her the way you touch something fragile, something precious. And she had not been treated as either of those things since she was too young to remember what either word felt like. Her eyes changed. She felt it happening and could not stop it. The violet drained, replaced by black, solid, deep, absolute. A color her species only produced in moments of profound biological recognition. Her dual hearts locked into a rhythm they had never beaten before. Frantic, syncopated, reaching outside her own body, reaching for the lone heartbeat on the other side of her face, the single fragile drum of a species too soft to survive and too stubborn to stop trying. She pulled back, slowly, every cell in her body screaming at her to stay. She looked at his hand, the one that had touched her neck. She looked at her guards. They had gone still. Their weapons were at their sides. Their heads were bowed low. They knew. Every Velari in that infirmary knew. They could smell the chemical change in her blood. The ancient cascade, the one that had not been triggered in the royal line for 3 centuries. The right of the shieldkin. A bonding response buried so deep in Velari neurobiology that the archive spoke of it as a myth, a relic. Triggered only when a member of the royal bloodline was held in a moment of total vulnerability by someone who showed no fear. No revulsion, no desire for power. It had not been triggered in 3 centuries, because no one had been foolish enough to comfort a Velari empress without wanting something in return. Until Dr. Rennick Vale, who apparently just wanted to finish his coffee. He did not know. He had no idea his hand had rewritten her cellular chemistry. He had no idea that the warmth spreading through her chest was not gratitude. It was something older, encoded at the genetic level, a bond that connected her life force to his. If the shieldkin died, the Empress would lose half her biological power, permanently. The strongest ruler in the galaxy had just acquired her greatest weakness. And he was standing there in a coffee-stained medical coat, looking at her like she was just another patient. "You kept me," she whispered. The words slipped out before she could cage them. The translator in his earpiece flickered, struggling with the Velari root, cycling between kept, held, shielded, bound. "I just fixed your shoulder," he said, offering a lopsided, exhausted smile. Standard triage. Standard triage. He did not know. He did not know. She stood, 7 feet of apex predator wrapped in a thin thermal blanket that he had draped over her shoulders without asking. She wore it like a royal cape, because everything she wore became royal by proximity. She turned to Kalen. "Secure him." He blinked. "Wait, what?" "He is shieldkin," she announced, and her voice rang in the infirmary like a bell forged from iron. "He has invoked the right. His life is now the Empire's life." The guards moved, but they did not raise their weapons at him. They turned outward, forming a circle, a living wall of armor and intent. He was no longer a prisoner. He was something far more complicated. But there was one thing I noticed in that moment, something small, something I would not understand until much later. Commander Kalen, the 8-foot mountain of armor with the cold iron eyes. He was staring at me. Not the way a bodyguard stares at a threat. Not the way a soldier stares at a stranger. He was staring at me the way a man stares at a ghost. Like he had seen my face before. Somewhere. A long time ago. His jaw was locked. His clawed hand was on the grip of his rifle. But his eyes were somewhere else. 12 years and 3,000 light years away. Then he blinked, and the moment was gone, and he was Commander Kalen again. Sharp, efficient, unreadable. Empress, we should move. Yes. She looked at me, those black eyes burning across the small distance between us. Doctor, you will come with us. Sure, I said. Let me get my coat. I grabbed the coat. I grabbed my father's bag. Because you do not leave your father behind, not even at the end of the world. And the world, as it turned out, was ending. I just did not know it yet. The shuttle climbed away from Halcyon 9 in silence. Through the viewport, the asteroid shrank to a smear of rock against the black, then to a pinprick, then to nothing at all. I sat across from her, flanked by two guards who could not decide whether to worship me or dissect me. They kept glancing at me like I was an artifact, like I might explode. My entire life fit in the duffel bag at my feet. 3 changes of clothes, a battered medical kit, an obscene quantity of instant coffee packets, my father's leather bag. That was it. 35 years of existence in things I could carry in 2 hands. The Empress sat across, her armor reflecting the cabin lights, her black eyes watching me the way a sculptor watches marble. I cleared my throat. So, casual, calm, the voice you use at airport security. Does this come with a pay raise or just more bodyguards? The guards stiffened. No one talked to the Empress like that. No one. But something moved in her chest. A vibration, low and rhythmic, rising up her throat. The Valari equivalent of a laugh. She killed it before it reached her mouth. But it had been there. For half a second, it had been there. You will have quarters on the Imperial deck, she said, her voice flat, controlled. About my patients here. You had 3 patients this month, a docker with a sprained ankle, a pilot with gravity sickness, an incident involving a ventilation grate. Someone's thorough. I am thorough about everything that belongs to me. The words landed in the space between us like a stone in still water. I watched the ripples cross my own thoughts. Confusion, a flash of indignation, and then something softer. I don't belong to you, I said, quietly, not challenging, just stating a fact. She held my gaze for a long moment. No, she admitted, you do not, but I find that I am unwilling to let you go, and I do not yet understand why, which is a problem, because I am accustomed to understanding everything. The Onyx Vanguard swallowed us whole. The flagship was the size of a small city. It hung in the dark like a cathedral of black stone and bioluminescent veins, pulsing slowly, breathing, like the ship itself was alive. I looked at it through the viewport, and I felt something I had not felt in 12 years. I felt small, small the way you feel when you are standing on the edge of an ocean, or staring up at a mountain, or realizing your life is about to change in ways you cannot map. The docking clamps engaged, the ramp extended, and the air of the Onyx Vanguard flooded into the shuttle, warm, filtered, humming with the deep vibration of a fusion reactor powerful enough to crack a planet's crust. Kalen stepped forward. Welcome to the Onyx Vanguard. Stay close to your escort. Do not touch anything. Do not speak to the crew. Do not. Don't worry, Commander. I shouldered my duffel bag. I'll try not to start any more ancient blood rituals. 1 per day is my limit. His jaw tightened, but I saw it again. That flicker, that look, the one from before. Like he wanted to say something. Like there was a question sitting behind his teeth that he could not let out yet. Then it was gone, and he was granted again. She assigned me quarters, 3 doors from her own. 3 doors, the whole ship, 60 levels, 5,000 cabins, 3 doors. The space was vast, vaulted ceilings, a bed that could have slept 4, a window that looked out at the slow rotation of the Kepler Nebula, amber and violet bleeding across the glass. I stood in the middle of the room. I dropped my duffel bag. It hit the polished floor with a small, sad thud. I laughed, a short, manic, bewildered laugh. The kind of laugh that escapes a man who has woken up inside someone else's life and cannot remember which door he came in through. I sat on the edge of the bed. I sat there for a long time. 3 doors away. Sharon pressed her hand against the wall. If she focused, if she let the bond settle into the space behind her sternum, she could feel the faint thrum of his heartbeat through 12 inches of reinforced stone. A single drum, lonely, brave, slightly off-tempo. She pulled her hand back. Her claws had left 5 shallow grooves in the wall. That was irrational. That was sentimental. That was beneath an empress. She put her hand back. I could not sleep. The bed was too big. The room was too quiet. The whole flagship hummed at a frequency that was just barely too low to ignore. I got up, pulled on a fresh shirt, tied my boots. I opened the door. The guard outside snapped to attention. "Sir, protocol requires. I am going to walk. You can come with me, or you cannot come with me, but I am going to walk." The guard hesitated. Then he fell into step. 3 paces behind me. I walked. I had no destination. I walked. The corridors blurred, black stone, pulsing veins, tall doors, the slow breath of the ship. After 20 minutes, I turned a corner, and I found her. She was on her hands and knees, a small Valari woman, old by their standards, which meant somewhere over 200 years. Her scales had faded to a soft gunmetal gray. Her tail wrapped neatly around her hip as she scrubbed a spot on the floor. She was using a cloth that looked like a rag, in a hallway built for queens. She looked up when I stopped. Her eyes were the color of warm amber. "You are him," she said. Her voice was reedy and dry, but it had a music to it, like a flute that had been left out in the rain and learned to like the sound. "I'm sorry, the shieldkin, the human." "Oh," I rubbed the back of my neck. "Yeah, I guess I am." She studied me for a long moment. Then she went back to scrubbing. I watched her for a few seconds. Then I knelt down beside her. The guard behind me made a strangled sound. I ignored him. "What are we cleaning?" "Coolant leak. The day crew missed it. It will eat through the floor by morning if no one scrubs." "Got another rag." She blinked. Then she produced a second cloth from her apron. I took it. I started scrubbing. We worked in silence for a while. She was faster than me, older, but precise. Like she had been doing this for so long the motion was part of her bones. "What's your name, Nessa?" "Rennick." "I know." She made a small clicking sound in her throat, different from the Empress's clicks, softer, almost amused. "You are smaller than I expected," she said. "Most people are, compared to your Empress. Most people are smaller than anyone on this ship." I laughed. She looked at me sideways, her amber eyes catching the quarter light. "You made her laugh," she said. "Sorry. The Empress, earlier, in the shuttle. You made her laugh. She thinks no one noticed, but the whole ship noticed." "I didn't." "You did." I sat back on my heels. "How long have you been on the ship, Nessa?" 41 years. I came aboard the Onyx Vanguard the year it was commissioned. I have served the throne under 3 empresses. 3. Empress Valaria, Empress Elira. A pause. Heavy. Like the whole corridor got a little smaller. And now Empress Sieran, Elira. The name did not mean anything to me yet, but something in the way Nessa said it. Soft, reverent, carrying the weight of an old grief. I stopped scrubbing. "Tell me about Elira." Nessa's hand stilled. She looked at me for a long, long moment. Then she sat back, folded her hands in her lap, looked down at the floor. "Empress Elira was Jaren's mother. I know that part. You know what the histories tell you. The histories tell you that Empress Elira died in a coup 20 years ago. The histories tell you that loyalists put her killers to the sword. The histories tell you that her 6-year-old daughter took the throne in a ceremony of unity. That's not what happened. Nessa met my eyes. Elira was the kindest soul I have ever known. She said it quietly, but the words filled the corridor like a hymn. She walked these halls and learned every cleaner's name, every cook's name, every soldier's name. She believed the throne should belong to its people, not the other way around. She was working on reforms, quiet ones, slow ones. She was going to share power with the council voluntarily. She was going to teach her daughter that gentleness was not a weakness. Nessa's hands tightened in her lap, and then she was gone. And the next day, Elder Thessar took that little girl and made her into something she was never meant to be. Something cold. Something cold moved through me. You think she was murdered. I do not think. Then what do you? I think she wrote down what she feared. I went still. What? Elira kept a journal. She wrote in it every night. She read parts of it to me sometimes. When I was scrubbing the corridor outside her chambers, she told me, if anything ever happens to me, the book is in the old library. Where is it now? Where I left it, in the old library, on the lower decks. No one goes there anymore. The new library is on deck 5. The old one is just forgotten. Nessa looked up at me, her amber eyes glassy and clear. I never opened it. It was not for me. It was for her daughter. If her daughter ever became someone who could read it. Why are you telling me this? Because tonight, she reached out a clawed hand, patted my arm once, gently. Tonight she let a stranger touch her neck, and she did not pull away. So I think maybe the book has waited long enough. I walked back to my quarters. I did not remember the walk. The guard followed me, silent. I lay on the enormous bed, staring up at the vaulted ceiling, the slow pulse of the bioluminescent veins, thinking about a woman I had never met, a mother who had been murdered for being kind, a 6-year-old girl who had been taught to stop crying, a 26-year-old empress who had let me put my hand on the back of her neck. I closed my eyes. I did not sleep. 3 doors away, Siren sat at her data terminal. It was 3 in the morning ship time. The corridors had dimmed to their deep blue night cycle. Her chambers were dark except for the faint glow of the screen. She had pulled the access logs, every door seal, every command override, every signal relay from the 6 hours before the attack. The pattern emerged slowly. The port hatch had been unsealed remotely. The guard rotation had been altered at the source. Her emergency medical beacon had been rerouted to nowhere. She would have bled out, in the dark between stars, far from any facility that could save her. The only reason she had not was that Kalen had manually overridden navigation, found Halcyon 9, found Rennick Vale. The rerouting command had been issued from a terminal with level 1 clearance. She narrowed the search, cross-referenced timestamps. The signal came from a terminal in the East Administrative Wing. Deck 4, a private office. Elder Thessar's office. Her breath caught. Because the Tsar was the man who had raised her, who had knelt before her blood-soaked throne 20 years ago and taught her how to stop grieving, who had held her hand at her mother's funeral, who had told her once when she was 8 years old and crying alone in her chambers that tears were a weapon her enemies would use against her. Thessar. She closed her eyes. She tried to remember what her mother's face had looked like. She could not. Not the whole face, just fragments. The curve of an eye ridge, the shape of a smile, the gold of those eyes, the hum of a lullaby in a dark nursery. 20 years of fortress walls. And tonight a human hand had found the one crack in the foundation. The hairline fracture she had spent 2 decades trying to seal. One single tear escaped her left eye, tracked down her cheek, hit the surface of the data terminal. It made a small, soft sound, a sound she had not heard in 20 years. She wiped it away. She did not wipe it away angrily. She wiped it away the way you wipe away something precious, something you did not realize you still had. The ship's artificial dawn began at 0600. The bioluminescent veins shifted from deep indigo to a pale clinical gold. The Onyx Vanguard woke up, and with it, the politics. I rolled onto my back, stared at the ceiling, wondered what I was supposed to wear to meet an elder council. The door chimed. A guard, a new one, younger. His voice was crisp. Dr. Vale, the Empress requests your presence in the throne room. The Elder Council has convened. At 6 in the morning. At 6 in the morning, sir. They couldn't wait until I had coffee. A pause. There will be coffee at the throne room, sir. Will there? No, sir. I lied. A small smile twitched at the corner of his mouth. Just for a second. Just long enough that I noticed. Then it was gone. He was a soldier again. Stone. I sighed. Give me 10 minutes. The throne room was a cathedral, a cavern of polished obsidian, banners that depicted 6 centuries of conquest, pillars carved from volcanic glass. The throne itself, a single piece of black stone, carved by hand, designed to be uncomfortable, designed to remind the ruler that power was never rest. Sieran sat in it. She wore her formal armor, the kind with the high collar, the kind that hid the soft scales on her neck, the kind that made her look like a fortress had grown a face. I walked in flanked by 2 guards. I had on the same scrubs I had worn the night before. My coffee mug was in my hand, half full of something dark and bitter that someone had produced from a service kitchen and called coffee in the loosest possible sense. 7 elders stood in a semicircle. Their scales had faded to the dull gray of long life. Their eyes were every shade of bronze. Their hands were folded behind their backs. And at their head, Elder Thessar, the oldest living Valari in the Dominion. His face was a topographic map of survival. His eyes were the color of tarnished bronze. He had served 3 empresses. He had buried 2. He had raised the woman on the throne. He looked at me, and I felt it. Not hatred, not yet. Calculation. I was looking at me the way an accountant looks at an unexpected line item. The way a watchmaker looks at a gear he did not install. The way a man looks at a problem he has not yet decided how to solve. He bowed, the precise depth prescribed by protocol. Not a millimeter more, not a millimeter less. Empress. His voice was dry parchment over grinding stone. The council requests an audience regarding the matter of the shieldkin. Sieran's eyes flicked to me, just for a second. Black. They had not turned back to violet since the outpost. I wondered if she had noticed. I wondered if she ever would. She looked back at Thessar. The council is granted its audience. Speak. He straightened. Behind him, the other elders shifted, aligning, forming a wall of bronze and copper eyes fixed on their empress. But there was one elder who was not behind Thessar. He stood off to the side, alone, against the far pillar, General Draven. I had not noticed him when I walked in, which was strange, because you should notice a man like Draven. He was tall, broader in the chest than the other Valari, combat-scarred. His armor was different, older. It carried the sigil of the Third Fleet. He did not speak. He did not move. He did not bow. He just watched. Watched me. Watched Sieran. Watched Thessar. Like a man watching a fire he had started himself, just to see if it would spread the way he wanted. I would not understand that look for a long time. The right of the shieldkin has not been invoked in 312 years. Thessar began. The last instance ended in catastrophe. The bonded human died within a season. Empress Valaria lost half her biological strength. The succession wars nearly tore the Dominion apart. He paused, letting the history settle, like ash, over the throne room. We do not question the biological reality of the bond. We question the wisdom of allowing it to persist. With a Terran, A species with a lifespan of 80 years. A species with no armor, no venom, no natural weapons of any kind. I drank my coffee. It was terrible. I drank it again. The council proposes two paths, Thasar said. First, the bond may be annulled through the right of severance. The Empress would lose approximately 15% of her biological capacity, permanently, but the vulnerability would be eliminated. Second, he folded his clawed hands behind his back. If the Empress insists on maintaining the bond, the human must prove his worth through the three trials of ascension. If he fails, the bond is severed by law, and the human is returned to Terran space. I waited. I waited for the rest of it. There was always a rest of it. And if he succeeds, Sharon asked. Thasar's expression did not change. No non-Veilari has ever succeeded. Silence. A long, deep throne room silence. The kind of silence that exists only in places that were built to hold it. I looked at Sharon. She looked at me. She did not look long, but long enough. The trials, she said. Something moved behind Thasar's eyes. A flicker. So brief I almost missed it. Surprise. Or something colder. At the far pillar, General Draven finally moved, just slightly, just his head, a small nod, almost imperceptible, like he was signing off on something. Then he turned, and he walked out, without asking permission, without bowing, without saying a single word. The other elders did not seem to notice, but I noticed, and so did she. Sharon's black eyes tracked Draven all the way to the door, and there was something in her face I could not read, but it looked a lot like fear. As the Empress commands, Thasar said, and he bowed again. And I just stood there in my coffee-stained scrubs, holding a mug of liquid mistake, and realizing that I had just been signed up for 3 ancient blood rituals before breakfast. I took another sip. The coffee did not get any better, but I drank it anyway, because some part of me, some quiet, stubborn, exiled part of me, recognized something in the woman on that obsidian throne. She had been holding a coffee that did not get better for 20 years, and she had drunk it anyway, because someone had told her she was not allowed to set it down. Until last night, until a hand on the back of her neck had told her she was okay. So fine. 3 trials. I had survived medical school. I had survived being exiled. I had survived 12 years of cold coffee. How bad could 3 Valari blood trials really be? I would find out. I would find out very soon. But first I had a library to find, and a journal to read, and a mother's voice to hear, for a daughter who had been waiting 20 years to be told that she was okay. Part 2, the first trial was called Blood. Of course it was. I stood in the center of an arena built to hold 300 Valari. The seats rose in tiered circles of black stone above me. Every single one of them was full. Every single one. Officers had shuttled in from escort ships just to watch. A human attempting the trials of ascension. The Dominion had not had entertainment this good in a generation. I was the entertainment. Lucky me. The arena floor was a perfect circle of obsidian. Cold under my boots, the lights overhead were harsh, white, clinical. They made everyone look like a corpse on an autopsy table. I appreciated the honesty. Above me, on an elevated stone seat that was not quite a throne, but was not quite not a throne, Sharon sat. Her face was a mask, imperial indifference, carved in stone, the kind of face that has watched men die and not blinked. But underneath, I could feel her. The bond hummed between us like a plucked wire, steady, tight, pulled taut by what was about to happen. Her heartbeats were a frantic, syncopated drum line in my chest. Faster than mine, louder than mine. She was terrified, and the woman who had been carved to feel nothing was feeling everything. The trial master approached. His name was Vosh, an elder. He had been conducting these trials for 90 years. He carried a ceremonial blade. The kind of blade that exists for one purpose, to open skin. The blade was coated, milky white venom, slow-acting, designed to enter the bloodstream and be metabolized by the Valari secondary liver. Humans do not have a secondary liver. This was not an oversight. This was the point. Vosh stopped in front of me. He was 8 feet tall. He looked down at me the way you look at a small dog that has wandered into a wolf council. Dr. Vale, do you accept the trial of blood? The arena went silent. I cleared my throat. Quick question. A long pause. You may ask. What's the molecular structure of the venom protein-based or alkaloid? Vosh blinked. In 90 years of trials, no one had ever asked a question. Protein-based, enzymatic degradation pathway, hepatic, through the secondary liver. Right, yeah, I don't have one of those. The arena began to murmur. But I have something you don't. I reached into the pocket of my scrubs. I pulled out a small vial. Clear liquid, faint blue tint. I had spent the entire night synthesizing it in the medical bay, working through the ship's pharmaceutical database, adapting Terran emergency room compounds to my own biology. I uncapped the vial. I drank it. Vosh stared. The entire arena stared. Above me, Siren's hand tightened on the armrest. The volcanic glass groaned. Epinephrine analog compound, I said, accelerates human hepatic processing by 300% for approximately 90 seconds. You drank it. I drank it before we began. That's traditionally how you take medication. Yes, but this is not standard procedure. Welcome to field medicine, Elder. We make it up as we go. Vosh looked up at the Empress. Shiren's face did not change, but her voice carried across the arena like a verdict. Proceed. The blade cut. I felt the venom enter the bloodstream. For about 4 seconds, I felt fine. And then my body remembered I was a soft species with one liver and approximately 30 seconds of bad decisions left in it. My knees buckled. I caught myself on the obsidian floor. My palms hit the cold stone. The room tilted. The light swam. A roaring filled my ears like an ocean, like a freight train, like the inside of a furnace. My jaw locked. A vein in my temple pulsed visibly. I could feel my body fighting, every cell screaming. The compound I had taken was doing its job, accelerating, burning through the venom faster than my biology was designed to allow. It hurt. It hurt the way you imagine fire hurts, before fire actually finds you. Above me, through the bond, I felt Jaren's hand close around her own throat. I felt her stand up, just slightly. I felt her sit back down through sheer force of will. The whole arena had gone silent. The kind of silent that exists when 300 predators are watching small prey decide whether to die. The color began to return to my face. My breathing deepened. The trembling slowed, stopped. And then I stood up. I wiped the blood from my forearm with the hem of my scrub top. I looked up at the stunned arena, at Vosh's wide eyes, at Sieren's white-knuckled grip on her armrest. I tilted my head. Next, the arena exploded, not into applause. Vailari do not applaud. Into a low collective rumble that vibrated through the stone. A sound that started in the chest, rolled up through the throat, released as something between a growl and a benediction. The sound a predator makes when it realizes the small thing it has been watching is not prey after all. Sieren watched me walk out. She did not let her face change, but beneath the throne, hidden from every eye in the arena, her hand was trembling. She had nearly stood. She had nearly stood up in front of 300 witnesses to save me, to carry me, to do something, anything. The Empress of 67 star systems had nearly abandoned her composure, her dignity, her empire, for an exiled medic in stained scrubs. That was the moment she understood. The bond was not just biology, it was something else, something the archives did not have a word for, because the Violari who had written the archives had never allowed themselves to feel it. I made it to the medical bay before I let my hands shake. I sat on a surgical stool. I put my head between my knees. I waited for the world to stop trying to spin in a direction my body did not approve of. 3 Valari medics stood in a half circle around me, watching, not breathing. "I'm fine," I said. "I'm fine." I was not fine, but I was not dying, in my line of work. The space between fine and not dying is a perfectly acceptable place to live. I drank water. I ate a ration bar. I asked one of the medics for coffee. She brought me coffee. It was the first real coffee I had been given since coming aboard. Someone had pulled actual beans from somewhere. Someone had ground them, brewed them. The mug was warm in my hands. The steam smelled like home. I looked at her. "Did Commander Kalen send this?" She blinked. "I cannot confirm or deny that, Doctor." "Tell him thank you." "I cannot relay messages from." "Tell him anyway." She bowed. She left. I drank the coffee. It was wonderful. I should have rested. I should have gone to my quarters and slept for 12 hours and let my body recover from the small chemical war it had just lost. But there was a young man on a bio bed 3 rooms over. His name was Corvus. He was 22 years old. He had 3 days to live, and he was Commander Kalen's brother. I knew this because Nessa had told me. While I had been scrubbing the corridor, she had said, in that reedy, soft voice, "There is a soldier on deck 6. He is dying. They have stopped fighting for him." She had said, "He has a brother who has not slept in a week." And then she had looked at me with those amber eyes, the same way she had looked at me when she had told me about Elira. I had recognized the look. It was the look of a person who has been carrying a small piece of grief for too long and has finally found someone willing to carry it with her. So I drank the coffee, I put down the mug, I stood up, and I walked to Corvus's room. The Valari physicians had cleared the space. In Valari medicine, a patient given palliative care is not abandoned. He is curated, the room is dimmed, the monitors are silenced, the family is summoned, the body is allowed to fail with dignity. The room felt like a cathedral nave, small, quiet, sacred. Corvus lay on the bio bed. He was Kalen's brother, but he did not look like him. His scales were younger, brighter, almost iridescent. He had the lean build of a bridge officer who spent too many hours at a console. His eyes were closed. His breathing was shallow. There was a thin line of pale blue fluid trickling from the corner of his mouth. His chest was open. The chitin plate over his heart had shattered in a training accident 3 days ago. The shrapnel had nicked the secondary chamber. The bleeding was internal. The Valari technique for reconstructing chitin armor required the body to be stable for 48 hours. Corvus's body had not been stable for 48 minutes. He was dying because his armor was broken, and no one could think of him as anything other than his armor. I stood there for a long moment, looking at the wound, looking at the way his body had tried to compensate, the way the secondary chamber was pumping too hard, the way the muscle wall around it was already stretching thin. "What are you doing in here?" I turned. "Kalen." He filled the doorway, full combat armor, his face raw with exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that comes from sitting beside a bed for 3 days and refusing to leave. His eyes were not the eyes of a commander. They were the eyes of a brother. I came to look at him. "You are not authorized. You are never going to authorize this, Commander. The Empress is not going to authorize this. The Council is not going to authorize this. So I came to look. He is not your patient. Everyone is my patient. That's sort of the deal I made." "What deal?" "With myself. A long time ago." Kalen stared at me for a long moment. His jaw was locked. His clawed hand was on the doorframe, and the doorframe was groaning under his grip. "Imperial physicians have declared him beyond help. Imperial physicians are trying to fix his armor. That is how Valari medicine works. That's why he's dying." Silence. A long, heavy, 12-second silence. What if we didn't try to fix the armor? I said quietly. Kalen blinked. What? The armor isn't the organ. It's a housing. If I can build a synthetic scaffold around the cardiac chamber, bypass the shattered plate, redirect the regenerative pathways, he doesn't need new armor. He needs structural support, just enough to hold the chamber in place until his body has time to heal. That is not possible. It's basic structural engineering. Honestly, I don't know why nobody thought of it before. Because he is Valari. He is a body with a wound. The rest is cultural. Kalen did not speak. He did not move. He just stood there in the doorway for what felt like a very long time. Then he said, "If you do this, and he dies." "He's going to die anyway, Commander, if he dies on your table." His voice cracked. The granite cracked. For just a second, the commander was not there. The brother was. I looked at him. "He will not die on my table." "You cannot promise that." "No." "Then why?" "Because if I don't try, he will definitely die. And I have a rule about that. A rule I made a long time ago." I worked for 6 hours. The Velari medics assisted. They did not believe in what I was doing, but they did not stop me. Kalen had given the order, and in the absence of Imperial protocol, the brothers' order held. I adapted instruments. I built the scaffold from synthetic material the ship's fabricator produced in 20-minute increments. I directed 2 assistants on cell suturing techniques no Velari medic had ever performed. The first 3 hours were the worst. My hands shook from the venom my body was still metabolizing. I had to stop twice, drink water, eat something, sit down for 90 seconds. The medics watched me. They did not say anything, but they brought me water without being asked. They held the instrument steady when my grip faltered. They positioned themselves to catch me if I fell. I did not fall. At hour 4, Corvus's heart monitor stabilized. At hour 5, it strengthened. At hour 6, he opened his eyes. He looked at the ceiling. He looked at the lights. He looked at me with confusion, with slow gathering awareness. His mouth moved, a single word in Valari. The translator in my ear flickered. Kalen. His brother was there in 3 strides. Commander Kalen of the Imperial Guard, decorated, feared, carved from the same granite as the Empress herself, knelt by the biobed of his younger brother, and placed his clawed hand against Corvus's cheek and lowered his head. I saw his shoulders shake, once, twice, and then, for the first time in his life, in front of 3 medics and 1 exiled human. Commander Kalen wept. I turned away. I did not need to see that. That moment was not mine. It was theirs. I left the medical bay. I walked out into the corridor, but I did not walk far, because Kalen followed me. 10 steps out, he caught up, silent, his armor barely making a sound. That was the eerie thing about a man his size. When Kalen wanted to move quietly, you did not hear him. "Doctor, a word." "Sure." He looked around. The corridor was empty, but he still lowered his voice. "Not here." I took me to an observation blister on deck 9. A small round room, a single porthole. The Kepler Nebula outside. Amber. Slow. Turning. He closed the door behind us. He sealed it. He stood facing the porthole, his back to me. His shoulders were still shaking, just slightly. He would not turn to face me until he had them under control. I did not speak. I waited. Finally, he turned. "You have questions about me," he said. "Not really." "Yes, you do. You saw me. In the infirmary at Halcyon 9, the way I looked at you, you wondered why." "Yeah," I admitted. "I did." He nodded. Once. Sharp. 12 years ago, he said. I was 38 years old. I commanded the Velari Third Fleet at the border. during the brief, ugly conflict with the Terran Federation. My coffee went cold in my chest. I was the officer who gave the order not to fire on a civilian transport that had drifted into our exclusion zone. It was against protocol. My superiors had ordered me to fire. I did not fire. Why? Because our sensors detected juvenile biosignatures on that transport. Children. I do not fire on ships with children on them. That was a rule I made for myself a long time ago in another war. The transport was shot down anyway, not by me, by General Draven's flanking squadron, which had not received my override or had chosen to ignore it. Draven. The name landed in the small room like a stone. There were survivors, Kalen said. A shuttle escaped the wreckage. It was pulled by a Terran medical station. There was a child aboard, 4 years old, punctured secondary lung. He turned fully. He looked at me. For 12 years, I have wondered who saved that child. What kind of physician could adapt Terran surgery to Velari anatomy in a field station with no reference materials? I have wondered if that physician knew what he had done, not just for that little girl, but for me. Kalen, I have carried the death of every child on that transport for 12 years, doctor. Every one of them. But that one lived. And she lived because a stranger, halfway across the border, refused to walk past a hurt child. He stopped. He breathed. His breath was shaking. I did not know it was you until I saw you in that infirmary, and then I knew, and I did not know what to do with knowing. I did not speak. I could not speak. 12 years. 12 years of writing letters to Lyra. 12 years of thinking I had done a small thing, a private thing, a thing that had cost me my career but had probably not mattered to anyone else. And on the other side of that border, another man had spent 12 years thinking about the same little girl, wondering, hoping, trying to live with what he had not been able to prevent. Her name is Lyra, I said. Kalen closed his eyes. He nodded, slow, once. She is 16 now, I said. She wants to be a doctor. He opened his eyes. They were wet. Of course she does, he said. Then he did something no Velari commander had done to a human in the recorded history of the Dominion. He knelt. Full battle armor, 8 feet of soldier, down on one knee, in front of me. Commander. Dr. Vale, I served the throne for 40 years. My allegiance was to the crown, to the Empress, to the Dominion. He looked up at me. Tonight my allegiance is to you, because you saved a child I could not save, because you saved my brother tonight when no one else would try, because you carry a debt I owe, and I do not know how to repay it, except to stand between you and anyone who wishes you harm, for as long as I am alive. I did not know what to say. I had never been knelt to in my life. I would like to say I said something noble, something worthy of the moment. I did not. I said, "Get up, Kalen. Please, this is very weird for me." He made a sound, a vibration in his chest. The Velari laugh. He stood. He did not smile. Kalen did not smile. But something in his eyes had changed. Something 12 years old had finally been allowed to rest. "There is something else," he said. "Of course there is. General Draven, the man who shot down that transport, he is now on this ship. He is a member of the council. He has level 1 clearance." I went cold. "Doctor, whatever is happening on this ship, whatever is being planned, watch that man and do not turn your back on him." That night I could not sleep, again. I went to the observation deck, the big one, Deck 12, the one that looked out at the whole nebula. I had never been there before, but the corridor went that way, and the doors were open, and I stopped, because I had never seen anything that beautiful. The Kepler Nebula filled the entire forward viewport, veils of amber and violet vast enough to swallow worlds, a nursery of stars, the kind of view that exists in textbooks and not in real life. Except this one was real. I sat on the low bench beneath the viewport. I put my head in my hands. I did not cry, but I came very close. I did not hear her come in. I felt her. The bond shifted, tightened, warmed. I looked up. Sharon stood in the doorway. She was not in her formal armor. She wore something softer, a tunic of dark Valari silk. The shoulder plates were gone. The high collar was gone, for the first time. I could see the softer scales along her arms, her collarbone, the delicate ones that lived beneath the heavy plate. She looked smaller. She looked like a person, not an empress, a person. "Come," she said quietly. "Sit." I'm sitting. I meant closer. I moved. She crossed the room. She sat beside me, not touching, 2 feet of space between us, her shoulder at the level of my eyeline, the nebula light catching on her scales like wet glass. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The ship hummed beneath us. The reactor pulsed. The nebula turned. "You saved him. He's not out of the woods. He's going to need months of rehabilitation. He'll need a synthetic scaffold around his heart for the rest of his life. He will be alive." Yes, that is different. I looked at her. She was looking at the nebula, but her hand, her clawed, dark, dangerous hand, was resting on the bench between us, inches from mine. I did not move my hand. I did not move it closer. I did not move it away. I just left it where it was, soft and pale and unarmored and ridiculous, and let the bond hum between us like a wire stretched between two distant cities. "Why did you do it?" she asked. "Save Corvus." "Yes, because he was dying and I could stop it." "That is not an answer. It's the only answer I have." A long pause. The nebula turned. She said very quietly, "I have spent my life believing that everyone who reaches for another being is reaching for something. A treaty, a favor, a debt. I have not been able to imagine, until this week, that a hand could simply reach, because the reaching is its own reason." I let that sit. I let it settle into the room. Then I said, "Can I tell you something? You may tell me anything. I had a sister. I had not said her name aloud in 18 years. I had not said her name aloud since the day my father did what my father did. And I had decided that I would carry the silence so the silence would not consume anyone else. But sitting under that nebula, beside a woman who had never been told it was okay to grieve, I felt the words climb up out of my chest. The way the warmth had climbed out of my hand the night I had touched the back of her neck. It just came. Her name was Elena. She was 12 years old. I was 17. The nebula rotated, slowly, indifferent, patient. She had a fever, 3 days of it. My father was a physician, a combat surgeon, 20 years military. His name was Dr. Weston Vale. He had carried a leather medical bag through more wars than most men see in a lifetime. He was good. He was so good. But that week, he had been on call for 36 hours. He came home, tired to the bone. He looked at my sister. He said the fever would break. He said we would take her in the morning. It was meningitis. She died at 2 in the morning. I was crying. I had not realized I was crying. A tear hit the back of my hand, and I noticed it. The way you notice rain when you have been walking outside and forgot you were outside. Sharon did not move. She did not reach for me. She did not say I am sorry. She just sat very still. The way you sit when a wild bird lands on your hand. The way you sit when something you cannot afford to startle has come to rest beside you. My father never forgave himself. He was a good doctor. He was a good father. He had missed one diagnosis in 36 hours, and his daughter died, and he spent 3 years trying to live with that. And then he couldn't anymore. I stopped. I could not finish the sentence more directly. I did not need to. Sieran understood, the way you understand something without being told, the way a body understands weather. He was tired, I said finally. He had been carrying it alone. He was so tired. I came home from college, second year, spring break. The house was quiet, and he was gone. I closed my eyes. I stopped believing in walking past people who were hurting, because the cost of walking past was a sister dead at 12, and a father who had spent his whole life saving strangers and could not save the person he loved most, and a mother who never came back into a kitchen without checking the doorway first. Silence. The nebula rotated, the reactor hummed, the ship lived. After a long, long time, Sharon spoke. 20 years ago, I lost my mother. I know. Nessa told you. A little. A small, soft vibration in her throat. Almost a laugh. Almost. Nessa has been on this ship since before I was born. She remembers everyone. She told me your mother was kind. Sharon closed her eyes. When she opened them, the black had softened, just slightly. My mother was kind. She was the only kind thing in my life. The night before she died, she held me in the nursery. She sang to me. I remember the song. I remember the gold of her eyes. I remember the warmth of her arm. The next morning, she was dead. And Elder Thessar told me grief was a luxury for the conquered, that I had to become something that could not grieve. And I did. I became it. I have been it. For 20 years, I have walked past a galaxy full of people in pain, because someone told me that was the only way to hold the throne. She turned to look at me. Her eyes were not violet. They were not black. For just a second, in the nebula light, they almost looked blue. I have been wrong, she said. I did not know what to say to that. So I did the thing my hands always do. I moved my hand across the 2 feet of space between us, across the inches, and I covered her clawed hand with mine. Her hand was cool, hard, dark, ridged, dangerous. My hand was warm, soft, pale, small, fragile. The contrast was absurd. I did not care. She did not move her hand away. We sat like that under the nebula for a long, long time, until the lights of the ship began their slow shift from night to morning, and neither of us had said another word, and neither of us needed to. The next morning was the trial of mind. They took me to a simulation pod, a dark curved chamber the shape of an egg. Neural conduits, sensor arrays, a single reclined chair. It was designed to read the pilot's memories, emotions, fears, then build a scenario shaped by them. Vosh was there, so was Thessar. Draven was there too, standing at the back, arms folded, watching. I lay back in the chair, the neural array descended, I closed my eyes, and the world dissolved. I opened them again, and I was in a war room, not a real one, a simulation, a war for a contested mining colony, 40,000 simulated lives, 2 opposing fleets, limited resources, imperfect intel. The Veilari approach to war is simple. Find the enemy, destroy the enemy, take what is left. I did not do that. I sent emissaries to the rebel commander. I offered concessions. I traded mineral rights for hostage release. I funneled humanitarian supplies through a back channel that the Council would later tell me did not technically exist in Veilari military doctrine. I lost half the contested resources. I lost 2 destroyers. I saved 81% of the simulated lives. The Veilari approach would have saved 43%. The scenario ended, the lights dimmed. I thought it was over. It was not over. The pod shifted. Because the pod does not just test tactics, it tests the mind. And to test the mind, it has to see the mind. And the pod had seen mine. The war room dissolved. And I was standing in a kitchen, my mother's kitchen, the one from before. Yellow linoleum, a window over the sink, a calendar on the wall from the year I was 20, A ceramic cookie jar shaped like a rooster. There was a man sitting at the table. Gray hair, leather medical bag beside his chair, empty coffee mug in his hands, ancient exhaustion in every line of his shoulders. My father, Dr. Weston Vale. I had not seen him in 15 years. My knees almost gave out. Dad? He looked up. He looked at me. His eyes were the same eyes I saw in the mirror. Tired, kind, broken in a place no one had ever thought to look. He did not speak. He just looked at me, waiting, like he had been waiting for a very long time. The younger me, the 17-year-old me, would have run out of that room. I did not run because I was 35 now, and I had held the hands of 92 people while they died. And I had learned that sometimes the only thing you can do for a person in pain is sit down beside them. I pulled out the chair. I sat. I looked at him. He looked at me. I'm not mad, Dad, I said. His face crumpled. Just a little. Just at the corners. You should be, he whispered. I understand now. I understand what it costs. Because I do the same thing you did. He closed his eyes. Tears fell. Not many, just enough. I couldn't anymore, he said. I know. I am so sorry, Rennick. I forgive you. 3 words. 3 words that had been waiting 15 years to be said. The kitchen brightened. Warm morning light. The kind that only exists in memory. He reached across the table. His hand. Old. Steady. The hand that had performed surgery under mortar fire. That had signed my birth certificate. That had held my sister's forehead when her fever spiked. He put his hand on mine, just for a moment. You keep going, he said. You promise me. You keep going. You do not stop the way I stopped. You put the bag down when you need to. You let people help you. You do not carry it alone. I promise, Dad. That's my boy. He faded. The kitchen faded. The last thing to go was the leather medical bag. Then even that was gone. I opened my eyes in the simulation pod. My face was wet. The pod hissed. The array retracted. Vosh was standing over me. His face was carefully blank. Because Valari trial masters do not comment on what they see inside the pod. But behind him, the Tsar was staring at me, with something in his ancient bronze eyes I did not recognize. Not calculation, not disdain, something almost like recognition. Like he had seen something in there he understood. And behind the Tsar, Draven. Draven was smiling. A small, cold, satisfied smile. Like a man watching a lock finally click open. Down in the medical bay. Corvus's monitor spiked. Just a small spike. Nothing dangerous. But he opened his eyes. Kalen was there. He had not left. He sat up straight. Corvus looked at his brother, and in the old Valari dialect, the one that is only used for one thing, he said, "Thank you. Not thank you for saving my life. Not thank you for being here." The old word, in the old dialect, meant, "I release you from the debt you carry." Kalen had spent years blaming himself for allowing Corvus to enlist, for every choice that had led to this bed. And Corvus, on the edge of dying, then on the edge of living, had used the last of his strength to say the words that mattered. I forgive you. Kalen bowed his head over his brother's hand, and in a small, quiet room on deck 6, with no one to see, a commander wept for the second time that day. While I was in the pod, Empress Sharon was in the old library. The old library was on deck 19, a forgotten corridor, dust on the lights, a door that had not been opened in 20 years. She went alone. She told her guards she needed privacy. She told Kalen she would be back in 2 hours. She told no one where she was going. The door creaked when she opened it. The smell of old paper and slow time and forgotten things. The library had been her mother's place. She remembered it now. In flashes, the way you remember a dream you had as a child, a reading nook by a tall window, a blanket on the floor, the hum of a voice reading to her, the shape of her mother's profile in the lamplight. She walked through the shelves. Her claws traced the spines of books no one had opened in 2 decades. She found it on the third shelf, in the third row, a small leather-bound journal, plain, unmarked, tucked between two ceremonial histories where no one would think to look for it. She lifted it out. She held it for a long moment. She did not open it. She walked to the reading nook. She sat down. She set the journal on her lap, and she sat there for a long time, with her mother's words closed in her hands. Then she opened. The handwriting was familiar. She had not seen it in 20 years. But the body remembers what the mind forgets. The shape of her mother's letters, the slope of the line, the little curl at the end of certain words. Tears began to fall before she had finished the first page. She wiped them away. She kept reading. Most of the entries were small, daily things. A note about a cook who had hurt his hand. A note about a guard who had a new baby. A note about Sharon herself. My daughter is 6 today. She asked me what stars taste like. I told her they taste like courage. She read for an hour. She read until she found the entry from 3 days before Elira died. The Tsar came to see me today. He is afraid, not for himself. He is afraid for my daughter. He believes something is being planned. He would not name the source. He kept looking at the door. Something is very wrong on this ship, he said. Elira, if a choice comes, choose the child, whatever it costs. Choose the child. I asked him what he meant. He did not answer. He looked older than I have ever seen him. If something happens to me, tell my daughter that love is not a weakness. It is the only strength that survives anything. Tell her, tell her, tell her I am still with her. Sharon closed the journal. She held it against her chest. She wept. She wept the way a person weeps when they have been holding their breath for 20 years. The way you weep when something inside you breaks, and the breaking turns out to be a release. She cried for her mother. She cried for the 6-year-old girl in the throne room. She cried for the 26-year-old woman who had walked past a galaxy of pain. She cried until she could not cry anymore. And then she stood up. She straightened her tunic. She tucked the journal under her arm. She wiped her face with the back of her clawed hand. And she walked. She walked through the old library. She walked through deck 19. She walked up 4 flights of stairs. She walked through the double doors of the Tsar's private office. She did not knock. The Tsar looked up from his desk. His face did not change, but she saw it in his eyes. For half a second. The recognition. He saw the journal in her hand. He saw the redness around her eyes. He saw the set of her jaw. He saw 20 years of careful construction crack down the middle. And he knew. He knew. He did not move. She closed the door behind her. She sealed it. She placed the journal on his desk. And she said, in a voice so quiet it could have been a whisper, in a voice so quiet it could have been a prayer, in a voice so quiet it shook every wall, you killed her. The Tsar did not answer. He looked at the journal. He looked at the Empress. He looked at his hands. And then, slowly, quietly, with the weariness of a man who had been carrying a stone for 20 years and was finally being allowed to set it down, he said, yes. The room was silent for a very long time. Sharon did not strike him. She wanted to. Every cell in her body wanted to. But there was something warm in her chest, steady, patient, the single drum of a single human heart. 3 decks away. That heartbeat held her in place. Why? He closed his eyes. Empress, there are things you do not yet know, things I cannot say in this room. If you strike me now, the truth dies with me. Then say it. I cannot. Not here, not yet. She stepped closer. Her shadow fell across the desk. You have 20 years of my grief to answer for, and you tell me, not here. Empress, please. She had never heard him say please in 20 years, not once. I raised you, he said quietly. I raised you cold. I raised you cruel. I raised you feared. Because if I had raised you kind, you would already be dead. And I would have failed the last promise I made to your mother. He looked up at her. His eyes were wet. When you can, access the sealed council archives. Command code Elira Gamma 6. Read what you find, and then judge me. She stared at him. She wanted to demand answers now, but something in his face stopped her. 20 years of hardness peeled back, just for a second, and what was underneath was grief, older than hers. She turned to leave. At the door she paused. She did not turn around. My mother loved you, she said. I know. I broke her heart before I took her life. I know. I hope it cost you something. It cost me everything, Empress. It cost me everything. She walked out. She made it 14 steps down the corridor. Then her legs gave out. She caught herself against the wall. Her claws bit deep into the polished stone. Her dual hearts were pounding out of rhythm. 20 years, every lesson, every doctrine, every cold, calculated decision, all of it, built on something she did not yet understand. She pressed her forehead against the wall. The stone was cold. Everything was cold. Except the faint warm pulse in her chest that was not hers. The single steady drum of a human heart. 3 decks above her, a red alarm began to pulse. Then another, then another. The bioluminescent veins shifted from gold to deep arterial red. The corridor lights dimmed. A low hum rose through the deck plates. The kind of hum that meant something very large was about to go very wrong. The ship-wide comm crackled. Kalen's voice, sharp, tight, wound around a fear she had not heard in him in 2 decades. Empress, the Elder Council's personal guard has turned. Decks 4 through 7 are compromised. The Ember Doctrine has cells embedded throughout the ship. They are moving toward the bridge. A pause, static, the faint sound of distant pulse, rifle fire. They are moving toward the human. Siren pushed herself off the wall. The trembling stopped. The grief stopped. The doubt stopped. All of it compressed into a single white-hot point of clarity that burned away everything except what mattered. Rennick. She had lost her mother to something she did not yet understand. She had lost her childhood to a doctrine designed by the man who had just wept at his desk. She had lost 20 years to a lie she was only now beginning to unravel. She would not. She would not. She would not lose this. Her eyes were not violet. They were not black. In the pulsing red light of the emergency alarms, they were beginning to glow blue. She began to run. Part 3. The Onyx Vanguard was bleeding. Sharon felt it in her bones. Not through the alarms, not through the calm, through something older. The way a captain feels a ship taking water. The way a mother knows the cry of her own child in a crowded room. She ran. Living armor at full velocity. A dark blur through corridors that had not seen her move this fast in 20 years. Crew members flattened themselves against the walls. Not because she ordered them to, because the sight of the Empress in full sprint was something the body registered as weather, as avalanche, as a thing you did not stand in front of. She did not take the main corridors, because the main corridors were where the mutineers would be. She took the auxiliary shaft, the one she had ordered built during construction, the one she had then made the engineers forget, the one that ran through the reactor housing. Narrow, hot, smelling of coolant and metal, and the ancient warmth of a fusion core that was older than she was. She dropped 3 levels in controlled descent, her claws scoring parallel lines in the metal as she braked. The reactor's heat pressed against the wall like a second pulse. She emerged on deck 7. The corridor was empty. But the fighting was close. She could hear it above her, the staccato bark of pulse rifles, the heavier thud of concussion charges, the sharp Valari battle cries of soldiers killing soldiers who had been comrades 12 hours ago. She turned the corner. She found him. He was not hiding. Of course he was not hiding. Dr. Rennick Vale was standing in the corridor outside the medical bay. He had built a barricade, with surgical gurneys, with equipment carts, with the broken half of a supply cabinet someone had probably needed for something. He had created a choke point. He had funneled it down to 3 feet. Behind him, 3 wounded Valari soldiers lay on the deck, their injuries dressed, their breathing steady, triaged in the order that humans triage, and Valari did not. I was holding a plasma cutter, a surgical tool designed to cut through chitin plate during emergency surgery. In his hands, it became a declaration. He weighed maybe 180 pounds. He wore no armor. He had no training. He had no reasonable hope of stopping a squad of armed mutineers. He was going to stop them anyway, or he was going to die trying. He looked up. He saw her. His face was pale, drawn tight with adrenaline. A bruise was forming on his left cheekbone where debris from an explosion had struck him. But his eyes were clear. He smiled, a small, tired, wry, impossible smile. Took you long enough. Something moved in her chest, not the bond, something older, something that had nothing to do with biology. You built a barricade. I built a barricade out of surgical equipment. I work with what I have. He glanced back at the wounded. 2 of them can still fight. The third has a punctured secondary lung. I need about an hour before I can stabilize him enough to move. She stepped over the gurney. She did not look at the wounded. She did not look at the barricade. She looked at him. Her dark, ridged, dangerous hand reached out. She did not touch his face. She did not touch his neck. She found his free hand and closed her clawed fingers around it. Her armor against his skin. Her dual hearts against his single one. She felt his pulse skip once, then lock in a steady thrum that traveled up her arm, through her chest, into the place where the bond lived. "Stay behind me," she said. "No." The words stopped her, not the volume, the certainty. He stepped out from behind the barricade. He stood beside her, the plasma cutter in his hand, his shoulder almost touching her forearm. The Empress in living battle armor next to a man in blood-stained scrubs holding a modified surgical tool. The contrast was absurd. She had stopped finding it absurd. "I don't hide behind people," he said quietly. "Not even empresses." She felt her dual hearts synchronize with something that was not her own cardiac rhythm. A human pulse, finding the space between her 2 beats, filling it. "Then stand beside me," she said. The mutineers came 4 minutes later, a squad of 12, the black and silver insignia of the Elder Council's personal guard. They moved in tactical formation. They were well-trained. They were well-armed. They were utterly unprepared. The squad leader rounded the corner. He saw the Empress. He saw the human. He saw their hands. He hesitated. That hesitation cost him, because a voice came from behind his formation. "Stand down." Commander Kalen stepped out of the side corridor. 15 soldiers with him, visors down, weapons up, trained on the mutineers' backs. The squad turned, caught between the Empress ahead and Kalen behind. 12 weapons, 15 weapons. The arithmetic was suddenly very simple. "Commander," the squad leader said, his voice tight, "the Elder Council has declared the Empress unfit. The succession protocols, you know them." "I know them." Kalen raised his visor. His eyes were not the eyes of a commander. They were the eyes of a brother whose only sibling was alive because a stranger had refused to walk past pain. "I do not serve the council. I do not serve the throne. I serve a debt that cannot be repaid. And tonight, that debt belongs to Dr. Rennick Vale." The formation cracked. One by one, weapons lowered. Not all of them. 3 holdouts kept their rifles raised. The zealots, the believers, the ones who would die for the cause. 9 rifles hit the floor. The 3 were subdued in seconds. The corridor went quiet. The Empress did not let go of the human's hand. Kalen approached. He looked at their hands. He did not comment. Decks 4 through 7 are being retaken, but the Ember Doctrine has fortified the bridge. Approximately 40 soldiers. They control weapons, atmosphere, navigation. He paused, heavier this time. They have the Tsar. Willingly. No, they pulled him from his quarters. It appears the extremists have decided the Elder's usefulness has expired. And Draven, missing. His quarters are empty. His office is sealed. No log of him leaving the ship. Siren's eyes went darker. Missing. Missing was worse than dead. They have issued a demand, Kalen said. You abdicate, or they vent the atmosphere on every deck below the bridge. He paused. 6,000 crew. The number hung in the red-lit corridor like a sentence of death. 6,000 soldiers, technicians, engineers, medics, cooks, the night watch, the day crew, the kitchen staff, the cleaners, Nessa, 6,000 lives. Rennick squeezed her hand. She felt his mind shift. The bond translated it, not in words, in texture, in the change of his pulse, the slight tilt of his head. I had moved into the gear that most people did not have. The doctor gear, the one where the panic stops and the math starts. The atmospheric processors, he said. How are they controlled? Kalen frowned at him. Central command, on the bridge. What about filtration? Separate circuit, biological contamination protocol, designed to function even if the main system is compromised. Hospital-grade isolation logic. Rennick closed his eyes. Siren watched him. Kalen watched him. The math was happening behind his eyelids, and it was happening very fast. Then we don't need the bridge. Siren stared at him. Explain. The filtration system has biological authority over the atmospheric processors because in a contamination event, air quality trumps everything. The bridge cannot override a contamination protocol. The protocol exists above their command authority. So you want to trigger a contamination alert. I want to make the ship believe there is a real biological threat in the air. The system will lock the processors into decontamination mode automatically. It will vent the threat. Cycle clean air. The Ember Doctrine will lose their leverage on the bridge consoles. They will be neutralized without a single shot. And the threat. He looked at her. He did not look away. I have to put it in the air. The Empress went very still. The kind of still that was not actually stillness. The kind of still that was a held storm. You will need to enter the filtration chamber, personally. Yes. And introduce a biological agent. Yes. Potent enough to fool the sensors, but not lethal. Yes. And the person standing in the chamber when it releases will be in there for 90 seconds to ensure full distribution. Yes. Define, for a human, 90 seconds of that exposure. He did not blink. Survivable. Probably. With immediate medical treatment. Probably. Welcome to Field Medicine, Empress. Probably is the best we get. She wanted to say no. Every cell in her body wanted to say no. She had just learned what it felt like to grieve. She did not want to find out what it felt like to lose him. She looked at the wounded soldiers behind the barricade. 3 of them. Their faces young, their breathing shallow but steady, because he had been there. She thought of 6,000. She thought of Nessa, the cook with the burned hand, the guard with the new baby, the bridge officer who had brought her coffee that morning before everything went wrong. She thought of her mother Elira, who had walked these corridors and learned every name. She thought of what her mother would have done. She closed her eyes. She did not. She did not. She did not say no. She said, Kalen, Take a squad, secure Deck 12, clear a path to the filtration control node. Empress, if he dies in that chamber, the shield can bond. I know what happens. Go. Kaylin hesitated for half a second, the first half second of hesitation she had ever seen from him. Then he saluted, bowed his head, turned. He took his soldiers, and he ran. The Deck 12 corridor was empty. Kaylin had cleared it before they arrived. The filtration chamber stood at the end of the hall, a cylindrical room 30 feet in diameter, ringed with intake vents. The air inside was cold, sterile, humming with the low vibration of industrial fans that pushed breathable atmosphere to every corner of the ship. Standing in it felt like standing inside a mechanical lung. I had synthesized the agent in 20 minutes in the medical bay, a modified Terran influenza strain, stripped of its reproductive capability, amplified for sensor detection. It would trigger every biological alarm on the ship. It would make anyone exposed feel like they had a severe flu for 6 hours. It would save 6,000 lives. But the concentration in a sealed chamber was different. A different math, a different body, and mine had been through a venom trial, in 6 hours of surgery, in the trial of mind, and almost no sleep for 3 days. I knew the math. I did not say the math. I stopped just inside the chamber door. I turned. Sharon stood on the other side of the reinforced glass. She could not come in. Her Veillari biology would metabolize the agent before it reached the sensors. The contamination would be neutralized before the protocol could trigger. It had to be done by a human, the only human on the ship. I held the canister. I looked at her through the glass. Her eyes were not violet. Her eyes were not black. In the cold light of the chamber, in the panic blue glow of the emergency systems, I swear her eyes were beginning to glow. A color I did not have a word for. A color that did not exist. Listen to me, I said. The calm in the door panel carried my voice through to her side. 60 seconds, then you open this door. The sensors need 90. The sensors will work faster. 60, not negotiable. Rennick, there's something I need to tell you. Her hands pressed flat against the glass, black claws against reinforced transparency. Tell me. A long pause. I did not come to Halcyon 9 because they sent me there. She went still. I chose it. I was offered 3 other stations after my exile. All of them easier, warmer, closer to home. I turned all of them down. Why? I swallowed. I had not said this out loud to anyone, not once, in 12 years. Her name is Lyra. She lives on a small mining moon. She is 16 years old. I have written her a letter every month for 12 years. She writes back sometimes, when she remembers. Halcyon 9 is the closest outpost to her system. That's why I chose it. The mail runs from Halcyon 9 reached her hub in 4 days. From anywhere else, they would have taken 3 weeks. I looked at the Empress through the glass. She wants to be a doctor. She told me last month. She wants to learn cardiac surgery. She wants to come to a Terran university. She wants to know if I will help. I have spent 12 years making sure that a little girl on a mining moon knows that someone is still thinking about her. Because I could not bear the idea of her growing up thinking the universe had forgotten her name. That is the kind of man you were bonded to. I just wanted you to know. Before I stopped. I could not finish the sentence. I did not need to. She wept, quietly. Black hands against the glass. Platinum hair against the reinforced steel. The most feared woman in the galaxy, weeping for an exiled medic she had known for 6 days. Open the valve, she whispered. Empress. Open the valve. Rennick, I love you. I had not meant to hear it. I had not expected to hear it. She had said it. She had said it. Her eyes were glowing blue, like a star being born. Open the valve. I opened the valve. The agent dispersed. A fine aerosol mist filled the chamber like fog rolling in from a cold sea. I breathed it in. I had to. There was no choice. It hit my bloodstream in 4 seconds. The first 30 seconds were tolerable. The shoulders tightened. The breathing changed. The lungs began to feel like they were full of cotton. At 30 seconds, the contamination sensors activated. Red lights flooded the chamber. Alarms screamed through the deck. The filtration system overrode the bridge. At 45 seconds, the atmospheric processors locked into decontamination mode across the entire ship. Clean air cycled through every deck. The Ember Doctrine watched their leverage evaporate on their own display screens. Their leverage was gone while I was in that chamber. Kalen was on the bridge. Kalen and 30 soldiers. The Ember Doctrine had held it for 6 hours. They held it for 6 more minutes. Then, Kalen's breaching charges tore through the emergency doors, and the assault was swift, brutal, efficient. 36 mutineers surrendered. 4 did not. The 4 were given the mercy of quick deaths, and at the far end of the bridge, tied to the command chair with combat wire, beaten badly, conscious, alive, was Elder Thessar. His face was a map of bruises. His right eye was swollen shut. Pale Valari blood crusted at the corner of his mouth. He had been worked on for hours, but he had refused every demand. He had refused to sign the abdication order. He had refused to authorize the atmospheric vent. He had refused, refused, refused. Because Thessar was the man with the highest procedural authority under the Empress. The Council could declare her unfit, but only Thessar could ratify it. Without his signature, the Ember Doctrine had no legal coup, only a hostile occupation. They had beaten him for 6 hours to get that signature. He had not given it. Kalen cut him free. The old elder slumped forward. Kalen caught him, lowered him gently to the deck, whispered something in the old Valari dialect, something a soldier says to another soldier who has held the line. Thessar looked up at Kalen, his good eye watery. "Draven," he rasped. "Watch for Draven. He is not on the bridge. He was never on the bridge." Where? He knew we would take the bridge. He set the bridge up as a decoy to occupy our forces. He is somewhere else, doing something else. Find him. Kalen straightened. He tapped his comm. "All units, General Draven is at large on this ship. Highest priority, weapons free on confirmation. Do not approach alone." Then his eyes cut across the wrecked bridge, toward the corridor, toward the filtration deck, toward Rennick, toward the one place on the ship where the Empress would go. Predictably, alone, terrified. The one place where the shieldkin was locked behind a reinforced door. Vulnerable, poisoned, alone. Kalen ran. At 50 seconds, my body began to fail. Not survive, fail. I had underestimated the concentration, or the chamber had pressurized the agent beyond my calculation, or my body, tired, stressed, already poisoned by the venom 3 days ago, had simply run out of reserves. My knees buckled. My hands hit the cold floor. My heart skipped, stopped for 1 second or 1 century. I could not tell. I felt it happen. I felt the moment a doctor knows, the moment when the body says, "This is the part where I am going to fail." I thought of Lyra. I thought of her last letter. I thought of how she had drawn a picture of her favorite cat at the bottom of the page. I thought of how I had not yet written back to tell her that of course I would help her become a doctor. I thought of Elena, my sister, 12 years old, calling my name down the hallway, asking if I would read to her. I thought of my father, in the kitchen in the simulation pod, the way his hand had felt on mine. "You keep going," he had said. "You promised me." I had promised. I had promised. I thought, "I am so sorry. I was not done." At 60 seconds, the door of the filtration chamber came off. It did not open. It came off. The reinforced steel frame tore free of the bulkhead. I would learn later that the impact had cracked 3 structural ribs of the chamber. The door had weighed 800 kilograms. It had been bolted in 12 places with industrial fasteners rated for vacuum. None of that had mattered. She came through it. I felt her before I saw her. Her armor against the contaminated air. The Valari biology already neutralizing the agent for her, her hands. Her hands on my shoulders, on my chest, lifting me, cradling me, pulling me out of the cold poison of the chamber and into the warmth of her body. She was on her knees. I was on hers. My head was against her chest. I could hear her dual hearts. 1, 2, 1, 2. Both of them. Slowing. The shieldkin bond did something it was not supposed to do. It reversed. Not because she made a conscious decision. Not because she had read the archive entry. Not because anyone had ever done this and lived. But because her cellular chemistry refused to let mine fail. Energy began to flow from her body into mine, through the points of contact, through the bond, through whatever ancient mechanism 3 centuries of Valari evolution had built into the royal bloodline. A surge of biological power pouring into me, filling cracks, restarting systems, forcing my heart to beat, forcing my lungs to breathe, forcing my cells to fight. I felt it. I felt her give, not a metaphor, a literal transfer. She was draining. Her internal reactor was bleeding itself dry to keep me alive. I tried to lift my hand. I tried to push her away. I tried to say, no. I could not move. I could not speak. I could only feel her arms around me, tight, trembling, steady. She felt her own power leaving her. She felt it the way you feel a fire dying, the way you feel a furnace running cold. She did not care. She did not pause. She did not negotiate, because beneath the loss, beneath the diminishment, she could feel his heart growing stronger, steadying, finding its rhythm. That heart that had no business being as stubborn as it was, that kept going. Not because it was designed to survive, because it simply refused to stop. His eyes opened. His face was still gray, drawn, wet with sweat, wet with something else. His hand came up, trembling. His thumb traced the ridge of her jaw, the line of her natural armor, with a gentleness that made the last of her resistance dissolve. "You're glowing." His voice was ruined, a rasp. "Your eyes, they're not black anymore." She could feel it, the warmth behind her irises, the color she had never produced, the color no Valari in recorded history had produced. She did not need a mirror. She could see it reflected in his eyes. Blue. "What does blue mean?" he whispered. She searched her memory. Violet for authority, black for recognition, gold for maternal love. The color her mother's eyes had glowed in the nursery. But blue. Blue was not in the archives. Blue had no precedent. "I do not know. It has never existed before." He smiled, faint, tired, real. "Then we get to decide what it means." She held him. She was holding him when the corridor lights above her flickered, and a shadow, a very large shadow, fell across the ruined door. General Draven. He stood in the doorway. Combat armor, Third Fleet insignia, a pulse rifle held loosely in his right hand, almost casual, almost as though he had all the time in the world. He had come alone. He had believed the Empress was diminished. He had believed the human was dying. He had believed this moment was his. He had timed it carefully. 20 years of patience, sharpened down to one arithmetic. A weakened Empress, a dead shieldkin, a council in confusion. He had calculated everything. He had calculated wrong. His face was calm. That was the worst part. His face was calm. "Empress," he said. His voice was smooth, almost warm, like an old uncle greeting his favorite niece at a family dinner. "You are diminished." Sharon did not move. Her arms were still around Rennick. "I have wondered for years what it would take to finally break the fortress your elder built. I never guessed it would be a man in a stained coat, with a soft heart, and too much stubbornness for his own species." He tilted his head. "Life is full of small surprises." "You planned the assassination." Her voice was flat. "I planned every step, including the failure. I needed a blade in your shoulder that would not kill you, because a dead empress is a martyr. A wounded empress is a candidate for replacement. 20 years ago, you ordered your mother killed." "Yes." Rennick's grip tightened on her arm. He was trying to sit up. She held him down. "Why?" "Because Elira was going to give the throne to the council, to the people, to a soft democracy of committees and consultation. And in the space of one generation, the Dominion would have fractured into 67 fighting warlords with no cohesion. I saved the Empire Empress. I killed one kind woman to save 67 star systems." "You forced the Tsar." Draven's smile widened, just slightly. "I did not force him. I offered him a choice." "What choice?" "His hands or yours." The room went cold. "I told him Elira would die that week. That was decided. The instrument was negotiable. Either he would end her, cleanly, quickly, with love and a private ceremony, and then he would raise you cold, hard, feared, so that I, and every general like me, would see you as an ally of the doctrine and not a threat to it. Or my men would end her, publicly, and they would end you too, because a soft daughter of a soft mother would only continue her mother's reforms, and that could not be permitted." Draven paused. "The Tsar chose. He killed the woman he loved to keep her daughter alive." Sharon's world tilted. The floor, the walls, the whole ship. Tilted 20 degrees, and then straightened, and then tilted again. 20 years. Every lesson, every cruelty, every ice-cold moment when the Tsar had refused to comfort her. Every doctrine drilled into her. Every soldier's death she had signed off on. Every kingdom she had crushed. All of it, all of it, had been a shield. The Tsar had built her into a monster, because a monster. Draven would not kill. He had killed the woman he loved, to save the child of that love. And then he had spent 20 years teaching that child to hate him, because if she loved him, she would ask questions, and if she asked questions, she would die. He had made himself the villain, so she could live. Sharon's eyes filled with tears. She did not wipe them. Rennick, on the floor, under her hands, whispered, "Sharon, it's okay. It's okay." The same words he had said to her on Halcyon 9, when his human hand had first touched the back of her neck. She looked down at him. She looked up at Draven. Something changed in her face. Draven saw it. His smile faltered. Because the woman he had been talking to, the wounded, diminished empress on the floor of a filtration chamber, was no longer that woman. She stood up, slowly. She lifted Rennick with her, gently, set him against the wall, made sure his breathing was steady, made sure his eyes were open. Then she turned, and she faced General Draven. She was smaller now, 20% diminished. Some of her hard edges gone, some of her ancient armor now living inside a human heart. But her eyes were blue, and blue had never existed before. "General Draven." Her voice was very quiet. "You killed my mother." He raised his rifle. He did not fire, because Kalen fired first. Kalen had arrived, silent, behind him, down the corridor. He had been listening. Long enough. He had heard enough. His pulse round took Draven in the shoulder, then the thigh, then the wrist. Draven's rifle clattered to the floor. He dropped to his knees, blood pooling under him. His combat armor scorched at 3 points. Violari medicine could keep him alive. Violari medicine would keep him alive. Long enough for a public trial. Long enough for the entire Dominion to hear what he had done. Kalen stepped over the fallen weapon. He looked at Jaren. Empress. Take him to the brig, alive, awake, every hour of it. Yes, Empress. Kalen bowed. Then he did something else. He looked at Rennick. He nodded. Just once. A commander. To a fellow soldier. A brother. To a brother. He dragged Draven out. Sharon turned back to the wall where Rennick sat. She knelt in front of him. She put her hand on the back of his neck. The same spot. The same gesture. Reversed now. Given back. You're okay, she whispered. You're okay, I've got you. He smiled. He closed his eyes. He slept. Draven's trial was held 1 week later. Thasar stood beside the throne. Because the Empress had commanded it. The full council was assembled. The senior officers, press correspondents from 67 star systems. The entire galaxy had been watching. Draven was brought in. He did not walk. He was carried on a biostretcher. Alive. Awake. Every wound tended. Every joint immobilized. He was made to hear every word. The evidence was played. His comm logs, his financial ledgers, his signed orders, his command of the flanking squadron that had shot down the civilian transport 12 years ago. His confession, recorded on the filtration deck, was played in full to the entire Dominion. Every kind person, every reformer, every gentle soul his doctrine had crushed for 2 decades, was named aloud. 683 names. The reading took 4 hours. When it was done, Sharon stood from the throne. She wore a lighter armor, reduced, less of it. Her high collar was gone. The soft scales of her neck were visible to the room. It was a small choice. It said everything. General Draven, you have been found guilty of high treason, of the murder of Empress Elira, of the attempted murder of Empress Yeren, of the deaths of 683 Imperial citizens across 2 decades, of the shooting down of the civilian transport that killed 142 refugees 12 years ago. The sentence for treason of this magnitude is death. Draven raised his chin, defiant even now. You may execute me, Empress, but the Empire will remember me as the man who tried to preserve it. The Empire will remember you as a coward who murdered a kind woman because he was too afraid of change. She turned to Kalen. Carry out the sentence. At sunrise, public. Stream to every system. Yes, Empress. Draven was carried out. Sharon turned to Thasar. The old elder had not spoken. He stood beside the throne, his bruises still healing, his right eye still swollen shut. But he stood. The room went silent. Sharon walked down the steps. She stopped in front of him. The Empress in front of the old elder. The daughter in front of the man who had raised her. The child in front of the man who had killed her mother. She looked up at him. She looked up at him for a long time. Then she did something no Velari Empress had ever done in the recorded history of the throne. The council gasped. The correspondence froze. The camera zoomed. Sharon knelt in front of Elder Thasar, and she took his old clawed hand in hers. She pressed it against her cheek, the way a child presses a father's hand. Thasar's face collapsed. 20 years of stone, cracking, falling, all at once. A great old tree that had been holding its breath for 20 years, finally allowed to exhale. Tears fell from his ancient bronze eyes, the first tears he had shed since the day he had killed the woman he loved. I forgive you, Sharon whispered. He shook his head, trying to refuse. No, Empress, you cannot. I forgive you. You do not know. I know everything, and I forgive you. You saved my life, every day, for 20 years. You paid a price no father should ever pay. You will not carry it alone anymore. Thessar sank to his knees in front of her, the two of them, on the steps of the throne, weeping, the most feared empress in the galaxy, and the man who had built her into that empress, both weeping, openly, in front of the entire Dominion. The correspondents did not know what to do. They filmed it anyway. By nightfall, the image was on every screen, in every system, in 67 star systems, on mining moons, and luxury pleasure worlds, and military outposts, and schoolrooms, an empress kneeling before her elder, forgiving a father his impossible sin, a galaxy that had been taught for 20 years that grief was weakness. Watch their empress grieve openly, and nothing broke, nothing burned. The Dominion held by the very thing Thessar had been convinced it could not survive. Held by love. The sentence for Thessar, announced the next morning, was exile, not death, the outer rim, monastery world. He would be permitted books, visitors, correspondence. He would die there, slowly, peacefully, with dignity intact. He accepted the sentence. He asked only one thing. May I write to the Empress sometimes? Sharon looked at him. You will write to me every week, or I will send Kalen to remind you. Thessar's eyes filled again. Yes, Empress, every week. He bowed, and he left the throne room, a free man in exile, his debt to a dead woman finally, beginning to lift. I woke up in the Imperial Medical Suite. I did not remember getting there. I did not remember much of anything for a few days, but my heart was beating, my lungs were working. I was alive, which was more than I had planned on. Sharon sat in a chair beside the bed. Every time I opened my eyes, she was there. Sometimes she was sleeping in the chair. Sometimes she was working on a data pad. Sometimes she was just watching me. Her eyes glowed soft blue, a color the archives had no word for. 2 days later, Sharon was going through files at my bedside. She had made it her business to personally examine every recovered document from the Ember Doctrine, every transcript, every encoded message, every financial trail. She was down to the deepest layer. Files that had been buried inside files, encrypted 3 times. Some of them were her mother's private records. Files Draven had confiscated and forgotten 20 years ago. She opened one, a photograph. I saw her go very still. Rennick, come here. I sat up slowly. I still moved carefully in those days. Every motion still took thought. She turned the pad so I could see. I saw a photograph of a little Valari girl, 4 years old, sitting on the edge of a hospital bed. Her secondary lung had been punctured. Her eyes were closed. She was so pale she was almost translucent. A human doctor was holding her hand. The human was 23 years old. He looked exhausted. He was wearing scrubs that did not fit. His hair was a mess. There was blood on his sleeve. I stared. That was me. I was that human. But how was that photograph in? Sharon turned the pad, showed me the back, handwriting, her mother's hand. This child from the orphan program. Pulled from the wreckage 3 weeks ago. Adoption guardian Empress Elira of the Valari Dominion. Trust fund established. Quiet. No public record. She is loved. Her name is Lyra. Watch over her. I could not breathe. Sharon's hand found mine. My mother, she said quietly. Her voice was thick. Was sponsoring orphans from the frontier. Quietly. Off the books. With private funds. The throne would not officially recognize a refugee program. So my mother did it herself. She was protecting children. Valari children. Human children. Any child. Draven killed her 20 years ago. And her program continued. Quietly. Passed hand to hand. Through her private staff. Nessa was one of them. She routed those children to safe worlds, Terran border stations, mining moons, every one of them, kept alive in my mother's name. She looked at me. Lyra was one of them. I did not speak. I could not speak. The transport she was on was a refugee ship sponsored by my mother's network. It drifted into Valari space because my mother had directed it toward a Terran clinic. Draven's flanking squadron shot it down. Kalen's command found survivors, sent a shuttle to a Terran field station. You, 12 years ago, 23 years old, refused an order to let her die. You were part of her program, and you never knew. I sat there for a long time. My mind moved slowly, not because it did not understand, but because the understanding was too big to fit inside me all at once. My father had taught me, do not walk past hurt people. I had learned it from him, painfully, slowly, over the death of my sister and the death of him. Somewhere in this galaxy, a Valari Empress had taught the same lesson to her people, quietly, off the books, in a network of small kindnesses. We had never met. She had died before I ever set foot on a Valari border station. But her lesson had reached across 2 decades, 2 species, 3,000 light years, to a moment where a 23-year-old exiled medic held a little girl's hand and decided not to let her go. I looked at Sharon. I did not know what to say. She said it for me. My mother reached your father, somehow, somewhere. 2 people who had never met, both believing the same impossible thing, that love is the only strength that lasts. She saved Lyra 15 years before you did. You just finished her work. I closed my eyes as tears came, quietly, the way they had come in the observation deck, the way they had come in the simulation pod, the way tears come when something you had thought was random turns out to have been kindness, waiting. 2 weeks later, I stood in the honor hall. My chest was still weak. My hands were still not entirely steady, but I stood under my own power. Kalen was there, full ceremonial armor, in his hands, across his palms, a Valari warblade, black metal, old as the Dominion itself. Corvus stood beside him. Corvus, healed, standing, a synthetic scaffold humming softly beneath his chest plate. He had a slight limp on his left side. He would always have it. He did not care. Neither did his brother. Kalen spoke. Dr. Rennick Vale, the Valari honor code has not been extended to a non-Valari in 5 centuries. I extend it to you today, not because you are shieldkin, not because you are bonded to the throne, but because you have earned it. As a soldier of a war we did not fight in uniforms. He held the blade out. I took it. It was heavier than I had expected. You do not have to swear anything, Kalen said. You have already sworn it 12 years ago in a field station over a little girl with a punctured lung. That is the oath. The blade is just a witness to it. I nodded. I could not speak. I did not need to. Corvus stepped forward. He said, very softly, "Thank you, Doctor, for giving me my brother back." I looked at him. I said the only thing I could think to say. "Take care of him." Corvus smiled. That night, in the observation deck, I signed the papers. Adoption, legal guardianship, educational sponsorship. Lyra was mine now, officially, on record, in every system that mattered. Sharon countersigned as co-guardian, because the Empress of 67 star systems does not do anything halfway. We watched the papers upload into the Imperial Archive. Then we sat under the Kepler Nebula, and we drank cold coffee. She rested her head against my shoulder. Careful, the way you rest something fragile, even though she was still the one who could crush a planet, even though I was still the one who could barely lift a chair without my left side cramping. Rennick, yes? What does blue mean? I had been thinking about it for weeks. I said, I think it means beginning. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I think you are right. I think it means I have never been this version of myself before, and neither has anyone in my bloodline. I think it means something new, something my mother started 20 years ago that she did not live to finish. She looked up at me. You finished it. We finished it together. Your mother started it. Your elder protected it. Kaylin carried it. Nessa held it. You. You just walked in and refused to let it die. She smiled. Somewhere in her memory, for the first time in 20 years, she could hear it clearly. A lullaby. Her mother's voice, warm, gold-eyed, alive, singing to a 6-year-old girl in a dark nursery 20 years ago, still with her, still here. The coffee is cold, she said. I told you, some things never change. And maybe, she looked at me, her eyes glowed blue, the color of beginnings. Maybe that is okay. She leaned over. She pressed her forehead against mine. And somewhere, on a mining moon, 3 days away by mail, a 16-year-old girl named Lyra opened a letter that told her she was going to medical school. And she cried. And she wrote back. And she signed it. Your daughter. The nebula turned in its ancient, slow way. The reactor hummed beneath us. The ship alive held its breath around us. And the coffee